a large, noisy crowd. I don't think we could ask for anything better. Welcome to the School of Architecture and Planning, to our first lecture of the semester, and for our much anticipated Walton Critic series. This is something we've looked forward to for now 13 years. It's a really terrific program. Many thanks to Kathleen Walton for supporting it all this time and with such generosity. You can see in the exhibit up front just the tip of the iceberg, the evidence of people, the experience, the knowledge that it's brought to our school. It's really a really amazing thing, and it's going to go on for a very long time. And thank you, Julio, for stewarding this for 13 years. We couldn't ask for a better person to do it. You've built an incredible platform for your successor. You will have a lot of involvement in helping us find and onboard your successor, and I really look forward to that. Tonight, we have a terrific speaker, someone who's really well known to the school. I'm going to let Julio introduce Travis, but I'm really excited. Travis is a dynamic teacher and speaker. It's really a privilege to have him here tonight. So I'd like now to turn the podium over to Julio to bring us into this evening's events.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this started in 2009. That was the first time we had a Walton Critic. That time was Antoine Predoc. And you could follow the story. So before I introduce our 15th Walton Critic, let me just say a little bit about the lecture series this fall, maybe to make sure that you pay attention and come. So this semester will offer all of us a great variety of lectures and insight that expand our understanding of architecture. I hope that's from today's consideration of how modern and pre-modern worlds could meet and inform one another and create synergy that Travis hopefully will present, to a film focused on how spirituality and architecture practice can work together. That's on October 2nd. It's a film. It's a screening of a film. So it's really nice, and the discussion with the director and one of the participants. From examining architecture's capacity to respond and symbolize the agency of poor communities in their pursuit of human dignity in Bangladesh, that our colleague Adnan Morshed will present in mid-October. Two, questioning what should we consider sacred following the journey of a world-class photographer, Chris Rainier, that will be at the end of October. And from dealing with the ethic of contemporary building practices by Sharon Price, to a fascinating design exploration of how urban design could begin to respond and advance our task in the 21st century by our colleague Jason Montgomery. That will close the lecture series. So I hope that you join us for this. That is not just for us, the faculty, but most important for you this semester. Before I continue here, I want to thank Christian Morales. We're probably working back, making sure that we have a good reception and you name it. And Lorenzo de Almeida. Without Lorenzo, I don't know what could happen in the school. So thank you both. Maybe more importantly of all, we thank you to the Walton family and Kathleen particularly, and what I learned, the sister of Thomas Walton. Thank you very much. None of this will be possible at all without their generosity, their vision, their openness, frankly, their love for our architecture community that Thomas so well represented. So I would like to ask Kathleen, like is tradition for this event, to say a few words.
Thank you, Julio. I'm sure those of you who have been to the last several, probably 4 of these events, you've heard my little song and dance. So I'm going to try to change it up a little. First, I want to thank Julio for all his hard work, inspiration, energy, and devotion to the program. It wouldn't nearly be what it is today without all of your efforts. For that, we're all grateful. I want to thank Travis Price for being the Walton Critic this year. Travis has been a part of the Catholic University since I can remember. And it is nice to have a family member be recognized this way. Thomas is very happy, I'm sure. My sister-in-law, Dr. Mary Dixon, is also here tonight. It's amazing to have another Walton family doctor here at Catholic University. Mary has just started working at the nursing school, and I know her father and brother are both full of pride. The Walton Critic program is the result of an effort by the Walton family to create a living tribute to Dr. Clarence Walton, the first lay president of the Catholic University of America. With his death in 2020, Dr. Thomas Walton, my husband and a longtime member of the architecture faculty, left it to me and the Walton family to support and help with the endowment that supports this program. We are happy to do so and value this living legacy to both my father and now my husband, and to recognize their skills and what they gave to the university. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for supporting our efforts. And thank you for listening to me while waiting for the star of tonight's show.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you again. Thank you very much. Before I introduce Travis in 1 minute, I wanted to remember that there are AI credits for you guys to sign up. If you want AI credits, just after the lecture, please sign up and I'll make sure you get your credits. And also there is a reception to follow, so make sure you come and join me. So let me introduce Travis Price. Travis Price, FAIA, is a recognized architect, environmental pioneer, author, and educator that over 40 years developed a modern architecture that works hand in hand with ecology and mythology, restoring the spirit of place to modern design. His vision is grounded in real-world successes with AIA award-winning private and public works, including the world's largest solar building for the Tennessee Valley Authority. He has designed new towns, unique residences, commercial properties, and institutional monuments. He coined the term passive solar with his early green architecture work in New Mexico. He installed the first wind machine in Manhattan, which initiated the Public Utilities Regulation Policy Act. Price's work has been published in many books and journals and recognized with numerous design awards in the US and abroad. Education-wise, and in concert with our Catholic University of America School of Architecture and Planning, Travis founded and directed the nonprofit Spirit of Place, Spirits of Design, an award-winning 25-year-long program where architecture students travel to remote sites throughout the world to construct environmental structures that are cultural place specific. Travis lectures to audiences at the Smithsonian Institution, Apple Headquarters, the AIA, Schools of Architecture, and the National Geographic Society, among others. He has been featured in several films, radio, and TV programs, including HGTV, when his home was declared one of the greenest homes of the world. And more recently, in The Tale of the Tongues, a film done in the County Mayo in Ireland. Today's lecture is entitled The Mythic Modern. Let's welcome Travis Price to the podium.
Thank you. We got the message, same shirts, so we're good to go. I really want to say good afternoon and thank you so very much, Julio, the Walton family, Dean Ferguson, and all of the faculty and people that I've worked with for so many years. It's an incredible honor to be here, and I thank you. And I'm not going to say too much more because I want to dig right into the photo time. But tonight's project is to take you on a voyage, the mythic modern. And as Julio said, ecology, mythology, meaning storytelling, the Jungian world, and technology are the icons of trying to understand past, future architecture today. So we click the screen. Yeah. Try. Great. Okay, so I'm going to take you on 3 voyages. Ancient wisdom is prologue. And as I was just chatting with Dean Ferguson, I love history as much as I do. And expeditions is an odyssey, things I've done, and practice, coming home. So this is almost like Odysseus. And I think you should laugh a little I've never met a four I didn't like, which is most of what my friends tell me. So I'm going to live in that lyrical world with you for the next hour or less. My work did begin. I was a wild Georgia boy, raised in the South, and traveled throughout the world with my family to Panama, Heidelberg, and so on. But I finally, after studying architecture, thought, I really need to know more about the past, the humanity of things. And so I moved to New Mexico. I was a St. Johnny. And out there, one of the big things that hit me was Chaco Canyon. Chaco Canyon is, as you can see, this beautiful array of Pueblo culture. And at that time, I went out there with about 10 architecture students and Harvard students, and we began to see all this snow just melt in a freezing environment. So I thought, curved building, Adobe. And so, yes, we were the sultans of solar. There was a crowd out there in the 70s and like in New Mexico, way before Ed Masria wrote his book about our work. We built the projects. And so these were all me, and Design for a Limited Planet was a big piece of that project. And that took me to another level in my life. And these are just past relics. Yes, I still have the cowboy hat. I was a wrangler and a karate teacher as well. But I went to New York and I saw all these poor people. There was a building an hour the size of 519 East 11th Street being burnt out by the Puerto Rican mafia that year, an hour each day. And so we took over. I don't know if Michael Friedberg is here, but he was one of the guys I worked with a lot. And we put together sweat equity co-ops. So we had no idea what we were doing, but we got grants and loans, and we started rebuilding the building. And everybody in this page except me was living on the street at the time. But we rebuilt this building, no heat, no rent. I got a grant. I never knew what that was. And we finally got the first solar collectors up in 1976. And a year later, put up the first wind machine, turned the meter backwards, and had the house and the building running. And naturally, we got sued by Con Ed, which we very much wanted. And we went all the way to the Capitol and passed the first law that allowed cogeneration of renewable energy. So I'm an old solar guy, and I'm a traveler, and I recognized all of that. Those were my first voyages. And suddenly, out of this chaos, who would hire me but the biggest utility in America, the Tennessee Valley Authority, to not only build this first major passive building, 78% reduction in energy, heating, lighting, and cooling, and $2 a square foot less than a 5-story building that went up the same 3 years actually. And we beamed light through the whole thing. It was another whole story to tell you. And we also blanketed the entire valley with 100,000 solar hot water heaters and trained unemployed Black youth in Memphis, which I spent a lot of time doing, to be the installers. So this was the 70s, and it feels like it's happening all over again today. But now I want to take you into something that I really, really love and appreciate. And it's a Jungian view of the world. I began to realize that it was not just the environment and ecology, but it was the deeper understanding of metaphor and lyric that really got to me. So my quote, memories, dreams, and visions compose each of us individually and collectively. Such is our invisibility in our minds. We see nature, but she does not see us. Our shared dreams compose our myths and our sacred values, which in turn shape us as we shape our architecture. Our character is embedded with such stories, both past and future. Our sacred and cultural archetypes, both past and future, are wedded into nature, spirits, and metaphors for design. And that's a big point of being an architect for me. These are the invisible dreams, the essences that make architecture silently sing through time. So now let's go on a little travel, where the spirit of geography meets the geography of the spirit. And as I've taken many of these shots, certainly not this one, but the scale and geometries of architecture, where do we start and never end? It's big. How do you measure stuff? I'm just floating now. These are 2 shots taken 6 inches off the rock, but they could be as good as 6 miles. And so one of the things that is really wrought with me is to understand these various scales of nature. Or what would you think this is? The guts of a patient, and yet it's 600 feet up in the air, and it's the ice breaking in Maine on a lake. At the same time, that same piece of nature goes deep inside into your own life. But nature and mind, in my mind, are completely separate, yet inseparable. Paradox will be the evening's best thing. And working with Andy Goldsworthy and knowing his work, I began to really see the essence of nature and the abstraction of geometry. And one of the most important influences is to understand that, as Aristotle said, the moon is not round. Round is here. There is nothing round. It's all up here. And that's really where the big surprise comes. Abstraction does not exist in nature. We just think it does. We place it there. So what's the best way to start understanding some of that? Go back in time. And this is ancient wisdom as prologue, cultural metaphors and sacred spaces. Probably the greatest, and being half Greek and half Irish, the Socratic leprechaun, as my friends call me. The reverence of the archetype, the Platonic forms himself. I spent a lot of time in this in Greek and English. If I was today to take you to the real Acropolis and see the sacred mountain, see the perfection of that geometry, and even its false curing to get to the perfect geometric state, and I heard the right song, I would see Athena walk out. But if I don't go there, it's like going back into Greece in time and saying, hey, turn on channel 78.3 and let's listen to the Rolling Stones. And they would go, what in the hell are you talking about? And suddenly click, if you get right to that point, you hear the Rolling Stones, you hear music. The opposite was happening in this sacred architecture. And certainly Delphi, if you ever go there, you will see spirits if your mind focuses on what Plato, Aristotle, Euclid, and others created, this geometry that takes you there. And that is one of the greatest values we have in our ancient and current architecture. Or let's take another view of the world where you get into the spiritual realm. Each one of these was authentically, in its beginning, a synagogue. Now, here's a culture that migrates and changes and so forth. That Greco project on the left is the first synagogue in America, in South Carolina. There's a wonderful sign on the front door. It says Shalom Yal. And then there's in Russia, the piece on the right was not a church converted to a synagogue. It was a synagogue, hiding, of course, and integrating into culture. There's long stories about this. On the left, the Alhambra appearance is not the Alhambra, of course, but that was originally a synagogue. And before he died, he didn't complete, Frank Lloyd Wright did, probably one of the most extraordinary synagogues I've ever seen outside of Philadelphia. I mean, 3 towers rising. So each culture has a story, and that's where I'm driving. And certainly, Christ, we could go on all night, especially on this campus and day. But the pursuit of the light, that view we see in all the great classical architecture, is all about this rising up into the infinite unknown. And even in Islam, inshallah, means to surrender. The whole notion there is to surrender to the will of Allah. And what better way to do that geometrically, architecturally, than to look, and I remember the first time I saw the Alhambra on my beat up motorcycle driving down when I was 17 from Heidelberg, and I wandered in and I almost fainted looking up at this piece, because those little triangles, those little perfect geometric pieces, both from Islam and from Greeks and eventually Romans, when they disappear and get smaller and smaller, you should go to the Alhambra one day. It's all triangles getting smaller and smaller. But what does it do? It tricks the eye into the infinite, the ability to have one more. There is no such place as infinity. It is just an ability to have one more. This was a fabulous one. And that goes all the way to Timbuktu. I introduced Chris Rainier, who's coming. This is one of his famous shots of a mosque where the desert meets the water, and climbing up each year to replace the mud. And of course, suffice it to say, spinning more and more and more, the whirling dervishes is no act. It is a way to lose the mind and go into the infinite. We go to India. We see the Yanni and the Lingam, the male and the female. Pretty obvious. I hope that you can see that. But the Naga, the snake, is the opposite of what we have in Christianity. It is the God. And so this creation and recreation forever becomes so symbolic, so important, that it actually is the body and spirit coming back and forth in reincarnation. And if you think that's something, try 402 acres at Angkor Wat, where you see the Yanni and the Lingam endlessly reproduced. And the Naga, the snake, they're the angels of the Hindu world, become symbolic. Then we go way up there in the mountains where there are different kinds of Buddhism, as you know, many kinds of Buddhism. And this one, having gone there a number of times, I mean, to hear the chanting, the sounds, it's as extraordinary as Christianity and its great chants. And yes, we finally moved to the world of the soft invisibility, the Buddhist, the Tibetan, not the Tibetan Buddhist form, but the Japanese Buddhist form, where you look at those rings, and those rings are not just pretty things, they're vibrations. And when you get into metaphysics and you stay in a Buddhist world, you sense vibrations, you see them. And you see the stone, the water is the sky, and vice versa. Tadao Ando loves to play with this game. And finally, of course, Fuji-san is the ultimate vision of elegant simplicity forever as form. And this goes on. China, Aztec, Maya, Inca, Chaco, Muisca, I'll show you. Each place has an incredible storytelling for an incredible bit of architecture. The very hitching post of the sun itself, Machu Picchu, is right down there. That piece, that city, just to give you an example, Machu Picchu is phenomenal because it's National Geographic about 20 years ago finally were able to recreate with digital technology all the great cities. Remember, this was only found in 1911, not very long ago. And what they found was that when you rebuilt Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman and the Chichen Itza, all these other places, it created a gigantic animal. This was shaped not as a building, not geometrically, but as a puma. And if you go at night and look at the stars, you realize, and it's all plastered into many Maya ruins, or sorry, Inca ruins, you'll see that they didn't look at the sky and say, oh, connect the dots. What they do is they look at the dark space, which is a puma. And as you go along the entire Inca Empire to all the great cities, Ollantaytambo, et cetera, each one is a gigantic animal in the black section of the sphere of the stars. And why is that so important? Because this became the metaphysical and the physical were made as one thing. And it's pretty amazing to see that. And by the Incan Empire, just for you guys, the distance, it was built in 100 years. The distance is the same distance as Madrid to Moscow. Just to give you a sense of scale. Massive. Teotihuacan and many, many others all have these extraordinary imperial markings. So all of that influenced me a lot and pulled me deeper and deeper into wanting to say, okay, how do you take those many stories into a modern world if you're going to be, say, a modern architect? And so this whole notion of spirit of place, spirit of design for Catholic Q, came up one day. And it was all about, I met a guy named Wade Davis. I'll talk about him a lot. He's one of my best friends. And the notion that there are millions, thousands, I should say, of cultures in the world that we haven't even touched yet. And so I walked into the dean's office and I said, look, I'd like to take maybe 3, 5, 6 students up to the Yukon area. And we just want to build a little project there based on an ancient tribe and see what we can do. Go. I thought I would get 6 students. The first lecture, we had 130 students sign up that first year. And we went there, and the whole goal of this all along was to create modern examples of ancient cultures that are still very much alive. Their languages are very much alive. but to go outside the big imperial world that we all live in. This is a book I wrote about it, The Mythic Modern, and I'll take you more deeply into it. But until there are about 4 projects missing, we became sort of the explorers of architecture. I was able to somehow connect to people all over the world who were anxious, very anxious to elevate their cultures and elevate them in a way that I think is really important. You can copy it, but that's not creating it. How do you take an ancient thought, even if it's a cross or a synagogue or a church or whatever, and turn it into something that tells the story of someone else, period, modern or not modern? So the Spirit of Place is designed and was based as a program here to help you meet somewhere in the world, design something that was modern, because what's happening globally is everybody's copying every little outfit, every little Native American. You buy a suit from the Pueblo tribe, from the Hopi tribe. That's just cornball. I mean, it's not the real worship. It's not the real thing about the culture. You see this all through Africa, everywhere, right? So Wade is one of my great gurus, if you will. He's a professor out north, but he was a great explorer in Nat Geo, and many stories to tell about his life. But every language, and that language is really a part of architecture, is an old growth forest of the mind, a watershed of thought, an entire ecosystem of spiritual possibilities. You should see the things that he discovers. So this was a chief. He was 103 then. I went up to Lake Igloo, way north, for the summer. There's 28 feet of snow in the winter. But Spirit of Place became an idea to just take you students and learn about a culture, learn about a place, have it available to us, and be able to build the project there that year to celebrate it. So Spirit of Place imbues the future of modern architecture, but with enduring culture myths based on their own shared sacred truths. So the first year, there we are. Getting there for 3 days was not easy from Vancouver. The tall fellow there is the new head of Gensler. There's an array of students from everywhere. That glacier you see, the very bottom down there is 10 stories tall. You're looking at 9 miles of ice. We got there and we began to study the spirit of the mask. And putting on the mask and taking off the mask, we do that every day. Psychologists help us take off our masks, and Revlon helps us put it back on. So and you have to understand that you see the fish's mouth, the whale, all these things, these masks. You put them on in that culture, you become part of the sacred world. You go into that realm, which is quite real, I can tell you. But Wade said, I have another big problem. I need 2 outhouses up at the campsite. I went, no, I didn't say that. But so we had 2 teams. The first built using the totem turd, we called it. It was wonderful. You could run it up and down. The second was a beautiful glass piece. I hope you guys start laughing soon. And looking out over this lake. So you had total privacy, the crystal crapper. Well, it was wonderful. We got back. Not only did it cover a major page in the New York Times, but we decided to put it into the Maryland AA. At the time, I was involved and lived in Maryland, and we named it Momentous Monuments to Movement, and we won. And then it grew from silliness and fun to a whole series of projects in Iquitos, Peru, which is only can get there by jet, an hour from Cusco. Lima. If you got there by boat, it would take 3 months. But we went upstream and we found a tribe that really was, the whole view was to look and hear the 10,000 senses. When you're in the Amazon, you have no idea how extraordinary it is. So with the tribal group, we built this floating house, right down to every square inch of it in 9 days. With local tribes and our pieces of technology. We brought some steel and we taught them things and they taught us things. From there, I'm going to go faster because I don't know my time. We went to Nepal through some friends who had invited me to work on a project there, a sacred project. And this is an interesting place. This is not India. And it's where Buddha meets Shiva. And as you saw the Naga snake before, you see this monk. And what is he doing? He's sitting there his entire life, focused on a rock that a tree is eating away, which was a sacred rock. The world changes there beyond anything you can imagine if you've been and go into it. And I want you to pay attention to this guru, because later he has a big part of my personal practice. And then, of course, the Buddhist world, the enchantment, going around in circles, around in circles. And so finally, I meet a group at a Nagajung mountain in Kathmandu. And that mountain is the place where Buddha came in his third reincarnation. And so we built a Naga ramp. You sit on a glass piece, you look down at thousands of snakes 300 feet below you. And the students built this in the middle of nowhere in 9 days. And it became one of the great sacred places just before a resting place for the Buddha. And flying back one night, I woke up and I looked down and everything was just green. Where am I? And it was Ireland. Had no idea. Whoops, sorry, I had myself. And so I thought, you know what? I've just got to take my children and go there. I've got to go. But something pulled me. And so I went back and I got to County Mayo. Now, you can debate the rest of my language here, but about good guys and bad guys. But Mayo is beyond the pale. I mean, Dublin down there, the Romans, everybody. This is the place where St. Patrick came from. This is the place where all the mystics and the poets go. And so I began to walk around and I found these extraordinary people who couldn't wait to go into ancient, deep Irish culture. I think there's a few Irish bloods in here, I think. But the Celtic there's no H. The tin place is a place that people go to where time past, future, and present actually happen. You have amazing moments. And this was a blowhole. That wave you see coming up is coming up through a hole about 100 yards from the cliff. And it's going up almost 80, 90 feet in the air. I've seen it go up to 200 feet. And you stand around it. So we built one where in this case, this is where the sea is eating the land. And 600 yards or so further, just barely seeable, is another place where the land is eating the sea. Every rock that's stationed there was cast in and landed that way. We never touched them. So this was a celebration that, I mean, you have no idea, hundreds of people came in their Celtic capes as well as their Catholic capes, because there you can't tell the difference. If you see the Irish cross, you see a cross, but you see a circle, right? This is the sun worshipers. This is the Son of God worshipers. And that merger has a lot to do with the Irish Catholicism. You guys okay? So the tin places, I hope you go there sometime. People come there. After I built this, I was shocked. I went back with the students. Now, how this works, by the way, is we work all semester on one idea. Oops, keep hitting this button. And then I found a place. We've got people who really want us to come. We have local construction people who help. All right, keeps going. And then we spend one semester, Monday night, and we get it all done. We write poems, we do pieces, and we actually create a shape that we all agree is the best of the best put together. It's not a competition, it's a single project. We do the construction documents and a lot of help. Kelly Davies sitting there gets it done. And then I've raised the funds there, and here we go. And every project you're going to see is built, start from finish in 9 days. And then we're out. Why 9 days is a mystery. It's the only time I had out from not taking care of my children. So the Temple of the Tides of Time. This is a place in Belmullet where people, 2 out of 3 that left there during the famine, never made it over here and never made it back. But this was the launch place. So these were all the souls crossing over to the Americas during the famine. These are pole dancers called architecture students. And yes, the pub was right next door. And here's the grand finale. There's some faculty there, but 9 days, rain or shine, there are 2 choices for breakfast, eat it or don't. and we take off at 6:30. But the beauty of it for you guys is you design with metaphor, you think about history, and then you build it with your own hands and local people. Or 1 year in Kilkenny, which is south, the Spirit of Place in 2008, the National AIA and some of the people at the White House came by and said, it's the 250th anniversary, we have to celebrate James Hoban. Who's James Hoban? I have no idea. He was a little Irish guy who got over here. He made wheels. He was a little bit of a carpenter, did a couple of little houses. And Thomas Jefferson cheated. Washington saw it and said, no, it's too French. And so he chose James Hoban, that guy he met down in South Carolina. And this year we came to the site where he was born and built the celebration of James Hoban, both in Irish and English. These phases of his life from struggling to end to it finally, even we were given copies of the White House plans and we engraved them into the glass, and the glass now reflects the piece, and it is right on the site where it was born. It's become every one of these has become kind of a national go-to. And by the way, in the whole Spirit of Place thing, we had studios as well in the Culture Sacred. So this year was a museum for James Hoban. Next year it would be housing for someone else. One of the greatest, and Stanley Hallett and Judy Hallett done a wonderful film. I couldn't fit it in, documented it, won a lot of awards on the Inishtuck Island. This was a place called The Gathering. Right off in the far right corner, you can sort of see way over there is a little peak. That's St. Patrick's. That's the great mountain where St. Patrick sat for 40 days and 40 nights. But this is what it's like. There are 4 seasons every day. You freeze to death, you sweat to death. And then we always have the poems revealing, whispering flames, revealing our held breath, yearning anew, rekindling the crisp aroma of echoes, burning embrace. That is just burning peat in that little piece of glass with a sunset shot. And what you have to understand about all this is that when you were leaving, if you're Irish and you were going to America or wherever you could get out from the British, and you would take the tong from your fireplace and you would take hot coals to your parents, 200, 300 yards away, and put the coal in there and put the tong there as a promise you would come back one day and take a coal back to light up. It's the most heartbreaking thing since most people didn't make it back. And then there's the crossing. This is where St. Patrick fought the great pagan druid and won and threw him off into that cliff. But there's a giant blowhole there, a giant blowhole. And I have to confess, this is the only one. It took us 11 days, not 9 days from scratch, because we built all the mounds around it. We brought in all the stainless steel. And this was a place now where people come constantly on the West Coast to see these sacred, there's a cave almost 300 meters that goes out to a sacred island somewhere, and all kinds of stories. All the local kids and poets wrote pieces that, so our Catholic University is embedded now all over Ireland in name and spirit. The last one I'm showing was in County Galway and County Mayo. It's literally sitting on the half spot. Manna MacLear was a most famous king. There have been 12 sunken boats found near there, but the whole original Irish thing was to go into the other world and come back up. And so as a result, this whole notion was the fishers of men with Christ throwing and bringing in the fish. So this was a mixture. This was a typical Spirit of Place model where we're abstracting it. And this was a project. This is 700 AD, a little shack over there. And this was our project with a fantastic mosaic team we brought along and finished this project also in 9 days and winning a lot of awards. Beautiful work because you're under the sea abstractly and you're in the forest abstractly. And the reflections back and forth, and people just ponder there all the time. That's towards the end of the job. Everybody's looking very happy. First, they're dying for 3 days. Then the 4th day, I don't know. In the 5th, 6 days, it's like heaven. Or 1 year on Pantelleria, where Circe seduced Odysseus, straight out of the Odyssey. I ended up with this wild Italian teacher. I think her name was Lavinia. You might have seen her. But we, we went there to really embrace the worship of Circe, who seduced all those men, turned them into animals. And this was a great story for me as a Greek. But this was all about just the sheer beauty in an ancient way of the woman's body and the fluidity of it. One of the great pieces was to go to Helsinki in 2010, Helsinki world capital, and deal with Kalevala. Kalevala is as ancient as Homer and the Nordic peoples. And the Kalevala Keto is the place we built in 9 days. And it's about Wainamoinen, who's a great king, and he would either challenge you to fight or play music. Either one would win. So who does he become later? Gandalf. This whole story comes from this little island, Sarasauri, where the people meet. And today, someone did a wonderful painting of Wainamoinen on the right, with Elvis singing Hunk of Burning Love on the left. That's Finland for you, on Sarasauri. But it was the World Design Capital. We were the kickoff event. I couldn't have felt prouder for the students. And we designed the whole project in 9 days in the local Finnish embassy here, which was really quite a trick to get it all done, but we did it beautifully, and it was fantastic. I won't take you too far into all the writing and the poetry, but we do build this left piece about the birthing and the story of that book, and we also build a model, and then in 9 days, it's a lot of work, but we assemble. Utu Kempo brought the stainless steel in, you raise funds. And this project now is the place on Sarasauri Island where people go and have corporate meetings, meditate, hang out, sleep. And the dancing is ancient. Even Merameko designed fabrics to celebrate our ceremony that day. Another quick trip to Nepal, to where there are no machines, just strictly cows pulling hose, and a tea garden, and the Peace Corps folks that come help us build a metaphorical world of reincarnating the relatives, because they bury them in the gardens. So here we are at 8,000 feet, little children on the right, bringing one rock from every village for days on end, Catholic youth students. And in 9 days, another wonderful AIA award moment where you wander in and you look into your mirror and you see the death zone of a recent relative, but you also see the heavens coming back, reincarnating. That's my favorite tie. I often wear it. And then finally, last, the Muisca are an ancient tribe older than the Inca, living in North, not Argentina, but Colombia. And this is the Guatavita. This is where the gold was. This is where all the gold had been dumped in awards, and they found it and they dug it out, and now it's replenishing itself. But there are 4 major tribal groups called the Muisca, and this year we built in 9 days a meeting place for all 4. They came from hundreds of miles for the opening ceremonies, and now it is a place like a school for an ancient crowd that is still very much alive. So that's part 2. Everybody good? Not too much. Now we're coming home. One of my first fun projects was to get Wade a writing studio next to the National Cathedral. And I even helped some students do a little spirited place there. They always call me a sacred spaceman when I walk by there. But this was a watershed moment for me. It's when I finally realized in 2000 that I too wanted to build architecture around these same principles of spiritual place, and that history and mythology brought into a modern idiom is the challenge. So, and that's the next book, The Architecture of Today as the Archaeology of Tomorrow. What are we going to be 300 years from now? So I built my first tree house. I live there still. This went through Fine Arts Commission. Thank you. I got approval in 28 seconds flat. It was a gift. Otherwise, I was gone. Long story on that one, but a fun one. And this tree house is literally a tree. It's hanging off a cable. But what you see in the back is a complete view into the forest. So everything outside is green, copper, metal. It's waterproof forever. It lasts forever. It's not like wood, much like stone. Stone I love, but I just can't afford this thick stone, you know. So anyway, but the house is literally cabled, and everything that's holding it up are these counterweights, and you can see the cables through the piece. And at the very bottom, that's where my sadhu is. There's the rock being eaten by the sacred tree. So that became a strong spiritual influence, not that I'm Hindu, but I remembered it forever as something of dedication, watching a tree eat a shrine. And inside, it's just what it is. It's like wearing a North Face jacket. The outside's waterproof, insulate all you can, and then just wear the nicest silk and cotton, nicest wood you can inside. Pretty straightforward stuff. But this is a good example of beginning this whole process with my clients of saying, who are you? What is your psychology? What is your meaningfulness? And so I'll keep rolling along for time, and often I love it when I talk to my atheist friends, as long as they're happy atheists. I can't stand the unhappy ones. But I do like the notion that I tell them, so you don't believe in something invisible, but you got to understand, this scares me because my whole house is held up by two invisible things, friction and gravity. Those pipes go in the ground and the whole thing is just hanging. And those big pieces you see down on the left, those are 5,000-pound earrings that hold the house in position with the wind. So almost everything I could do spiritually, find the invisible and the visible. That's what it did. And then this is how I paint like this when I'm doing a house for Shirley Parsons, an Irish gal who just loved the sun, and this due south passive solar house becomes also just a beacon in West Virginia. This is almost 20 years ago. And it had to be all occupied because she was wheelchair with her husband. But I'm just zooming you through these things now because every one is a short little story about the couple. She was an author, he was a lawyer. I just put that sign in yesterday about Barbie or Alice in Wonderland. This is the front of the house. You'd never know it. Oh, beautiful, nice little thing of sweet flowers. I mean, I loved it. We kept it, we preserved it. Preserve history is always my thing. If it's history, preserve it, then add modern history. But so the back is this. She was an author, books were everywhere. So I built a tower of books on the back. They wanted to explode into Rock Creek Park, and the moon rising was always that way. Trees to paper, and you never know what's inside and what's outside. There was a kind of optical illusion about this book, which is this house, which we published quite a bit. And I went back to Andy's work again, Andy Goldsworthy, who I really admire. And start thinking about how to build that stairwell, which is now full of translucency, light, but also books. It's a vertical library, and everything is Russian ply, so it's as eco as you can get in terms of passivity. And that
books.
Eh?
Where are the books?
The photos were taken before the books. The art.
So out on the side?
Yeah, there's little shelves each way up.
Can you show it?
No, I don't have it on here.
No.
I might- I would if I could, but yeah. No, it's old pictures from, this is a long time ago. And then they started collecting. She's written a number of books, but that's the back side. Why does this thing keep turning on me? I'm losing my thing. And finally, the living room, which is now furnished. That's why I'm gonna get you once. And then you come up, and translucency and light go everywhere. The old house was restored. The living room now became a grand dining room with a big table, and everywhere are things from Tibet. These are called talking stones, which people carry for thousands of miles to worship. A wonderful couple on the Potomac, Gelman Solomon. The whole idea of their house was they really they're looking right at where the water divides, and stillness and calmness, but also this whole idea of splitting and coming into the promised land. So when you arrive at the house, she's lifting up and you're seeing the entire Potomac 6 miles each way, but you have to go there to do it. And you have this moment of expression. The angles are perfectly, that's perfect. Summer sun it shades the entire porch, and winter sun succeeds right through the entire house. So it really has a super low energy rate, but most importantly, it's lifting up their power to a heavenly position through their Jewish ritual of life. I'm going fast because I'm doing too much. This house also got out of Fine Arts Historic, right near the cathedral, for a couple that I kept asking them over and over, what do you do? Tell me something about yourselves. And their hands kept going like this, like this. I said, we love our children, we love art, we love each other, we love our children. Okay, 2 hands holding art and children became the theme of the project. Both sides, they needed privacy, but every window has a moment, a time clock going through it. And they were shocked when they moved in at how much they never looked at clocks again. They could tell what time it was. There's a pool in the back, great sculptures to collect. Terry Linsner was a really amazing character. He indicted Nixon. Very interesting. But the house is wrapped in water, and sculpture was his passion, arts. Are 2 rivers in the forest meeting by 2 trees, 2 little streams, and this house became a getaway in West Virginia a number of years ago. But you can see the lyrics. Each person as a client gets to tell me a story, and I pull it, and they love trees. And now these trees have lasted forever because we figure out how to make them sit. The house sits on poles and it grows up, and the shades come down the winter Japanese style, so the house is warm. And that is the getaway house, now almost permanent. That's me contemplating the bathroom. And then the Brunel house. I could not get a metaphor out of this guy to save my life, but he just kept talking about his iPhone, and how it opens, and how it opens. So the whole house became a series of, you walk up and you don't know what it is until you open the door, Mr. Jones, and you see, the inside. But the houses actually split, and there are glass bridges between the family rooms and so on. This was the ambassador to Richard David or vacuum cleaners. You guys remember? He was the ambassador to Finland. It helped us pull all that off for the students. And now down in Cabo, he is at the spot where they go for the whales. I can't believe this guy is good, but it's where the whales wallow in wonder. And 100%, this house and now its complex that we worked on is 100% off grid. This is all PV cells, all water, everything else, 100%. Because when things go out down there, you're screwed, and because the waves, it comes in big gaps. But it just goes to show you that beauty and the whales and the cats all become part of his story, and it's telling that client's story that is so great. Or working with Sheila Lee, who was also a student here and worked with us for a long time, restoring a house for herself in Atlanta recently. It was a beautiful restoration job, but we really wanted a modern rear, and to make it not be an accessory house, we had to have a walkway. So that's why all the wild cover is there. I loved bringing back this 1800, I forget the name of the architect, it's very famous, piece together, and then, adding the place to go meditate, agitate, do everything except agitate, and sit and swim and be in silence. And we preserve the back-to-back house as well to go with it. This is a more recent project we've been dangles with. Can't say much about it, but she's done, and it was just called Vast. That's all we could get from this client was vast. I want it bigger. I want it better. And we wanted it minimalist. We even had an underwater camera behind a waterfall. So when you pulled up, you could see the film itself. Can't say much more about it in terms of privacy, but we're quite proud of this project recently. Yeah. Multifamily, just to end all this. Yes, I've had my share. We won a competition to do a women's shelter in Ithaca. one of the big ideas was that every room had a different window. So a woman's face in every one is a great Bob Dylan line. And very inexpensive. We came in under budget for HUD, which is hard. And it just goes to show you that some of the better things we saw can also reflect on society's needs, like housing for impoverished women and women that were under a lot of severe stress. As you may know, across the street a few blocks, some young guys from Catholic U walked in one day, said they had a piece of land over there and they need to tear down something. And I said, well, I had another thesis in school. It's called sea containers. I wanted to build sea containers that you could just move from city to city. Just take your house with you. So in less than 6 months, we not only sketched it, we permitted it, we built it, and 24 Catholic U students moved in that fall in mid-September. And this is just a whole new series of something that was way back in my memory bank of working with sea containers. And now we've gotten a number of clients, even up in Costa Rica. We've been working on this project to advance to an amazing level housing or institutional works. One of our favorite projects right now is a 5-story black Dolman Black Heritage Museum in Hagerstown, Maryland. They found us and they just said, we love what you do, but we were contained. And that's all we want to do. So this is a 5-story sea container tower with an interior floating in a pond, so it feels infinite, with rolling waves of grass and sculpture coming. And we'll be seeing more about that soon. We have just gotten it approved in planning. And over the years, I was at St. Johnny learning the great books, and I got picked one day to design an addition. We restored 1920s historic building. The interior of it was modernized. That was the part we took out, but also as an ode to Ptolemy, Copernicus, Kepler, the movement of the stars, the ancients again. The entire interior was based on a complex jazz piece about the flow of the planets. Even the little statues in there are the guardians of Plato's cave. There's 100 little things. I've got a little booklet that you have to go find out that we did that are secret. One of my favorite, being part of the Greek Empire, were Spartan shields. And these swords became the indoor-outdoor lights for the project. Arose Shalom, I had never been in a synagogue. I was one of 10 people, the only non-Jewish guy. And I asked, why did I get it? Because you asked, what is a synagogue? And these wings of angels floating, and this was done some years ago, and we're still adding more and more pieces to it. Another piece that we didn't get going yet was an entry for National Geographic. There is no entry, it's just a plaza. And so the whole idea is to do a structural piece, mostly to let light in and let it be open and free, but back to the solar world, having all these fins shaded, and at the same time twist and turn and beam the light. That's probably the most energy building thing you could ever do, is just beam light, and you save heating and cooling. Or more recently, there was a great competition for the Peace Corps, and our biggest theme was hands helping hands, 2 vertical pieces near the Capitol. That's still out in floating world somewhere in terms of determining what's going to happen. And so as we end, I just give an ode once again to Andy Goldsworthy, who I'd, like I said, met and worked with for a while. And one of our last projects that's still in transition is a roof that protects and chants never ending. The Hare Krishna temple in Virginia, my sweet Lord, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare. We all have heard that song before, but literally this is about steel outside reflecting the light, not just away, but reflecting the light directly on the Godhead itself inside, and a glass wall, and then a wood wall that can echo the change, because the sounds you make in mantra yoga and mantra Hinduism completely take you to another world in terms of the Godhead. So these are the snow shots. I think it's going to be something that shines all the time. And my last question is, this is Sacred, who's coming up with later, but so for all of you, what is the difference between a sacred place and a sacred space? We'll talk about that later in the studio. What would Socrates say? Imagine that which you don't know about what you don't know that you don't know yet. So my life, my work, my help with all this is that creativity is our prayer. And in it, all of us, whether we're classical go modern, all that, that creativity is what really soars the human spirit and brings us all together as architects. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
We have some time for questions. So if you have any questions for Travis, please raise your hand and we can get your microphone. I can go and do it.
You got it. Yeah. If you're going to eat, bring me something, will you? Yeah.
My question is, with those 9-day projects, did you have all the glass material design? Was that all?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
That was all
the nice
pre-
thing about teaching is you get to dream. The nice thing about preaching and doing it is you know when to order the glass. Yeah, that and where to get the stones and I'll never forget Kelly sitting here. Her husband is this big, Mr. Football, and students ask, you know, how would you just help me carry this rock over? And he would say, sure. And he would pick them and the rock up. But it's all planned ahead and lined up, and that is a lot of work for a 3-credit course from my end. But I love it. The students, we won like 8 AIA awards, a lot of stuff for the students, and I think. For me, it was also a learning lesson for all the architecture I do with clients now. As I said, everything has become a metaphor. I'm not even sure how I can work without it. And that to me, the beauty of, and I say this to everybody is in the classical program, that's the beauty of the class. The storytelling in it is extraordinary. And if you keep that alive, you keep the human mind alive. And I think the mind is bigger than nature. It's the creator, itself.
There's a question here.
Yeah.
My question was regarding the myths and the history that you were talking about earlier, that you incorporated it into the design aspect, but I wanted to know how you ensured that you didn't offend or insult anybody within that tradition or that culture. Is there a set of people that you go to for questions for that?
Yeah, great question. And it starts right in the beginning. I mean, a year or two in advance, I'm meeting with those places, whether it's say Nepal, for instance, and you either get into the deep side of what everybody's about, and you also get with some of the parents who say, I don't want my son in Nepal to have a Kawasaki motorcycle and get drunk. I want him to be like he's already. It was recently out in New Mexico and talking to some of the tribal members that I've known for years, and they don't want these copycats because it insults the culture. And so if you saw those things, what made it proud, I think, for everybody was it was the story. They felt it right away, and especially the Catholic. I mean, we had 500 people come to Oak. The dancing went on for 3 days in Nepal, celebrating. So I feel good about that. What I'm really curious about is how we turn the other arts of the world, fashion, everything else that we do, into keeping the Jungian subconscious of all cultures alive, doing it environmentally sound, but creating a world where we also invite modernity to take its place, and steel and glass and things like that help do that. But I think if you don't have that, you're right. It's a great question. Without that heart, it's no good.
Travis, a great talk.
Thank
But following on the last question, you're working 2 years in advance and you're kind of working through design work with the students. Is there a time prior to construction where you're showing it to the people you're going to build it for?
Oh, absolutely not. They got to pay for that. No, there's, yeah, what, you know, what's funny? It started slowly with Wade and some of us doing stuff. And the word just got out and people said, how do you find these places? How do you get these? I think they find me. I have a list a mile long. And because I think people, back to your question, are hungry to hold on to history, but also hungry to it be a part of the bigger world of all of us, you know, and so I don't give them any ideas. That's the one thing I leave to the students. The kissing cousins night, when we put them all together, I call it the kissing cousins. That's a Georgia expression. But that's the night when they all marry their ideas together and come up with something that's all of them, this for the client and for them, one thing that actually works. It's great teamwork, really great teamwork. Does that answer? Yeah.
Any other questions? Two more questions and then we go for reception. Here and then you.
I think it's tequila, isn't it?
This is a bit off topic, but what role do you see for artificial intelligence in the architecture profession and how it will affect students either here or any architecture student?
That's a fun question. Thank you. Since I'm artificial, I think that I think that's a really fun question. It would be really cool to have a spirit of place AI. In other words, who are all these robots? I mean, have you seen the robots playing tennis lately? I mean, it's mind blowing. And I just really do worry about these things, as does everyone. When do we leave the human spirit? And when does the AI take that over? I can get that everybody now works more with their fingers than their hands, but there's something about the spirit in a human being that resounds, especially in sacred architecture. And I just really do wonder where that's going to be. But I advise you to read that book, Homo Deus. Has anybody read that yet? It's this guy that did Homo sapiens, tremendous scientist, but it's about the future. And I've seen it at DARPA meetings. Watch out, folks. It's coming. And his question to answer philosophically is, what's going to happen not when you live to be 100, 200, 300? What's going to happen when you don't die? You get AI'd. And those are the kind of questions I'd love to take into a design studio and what is an AI building going to be? And hopefully it's not going to be a television or an iPhone where you can change the walls with a split finger and it becomes Miami or it becomes Alaska. You know, I mean, but it's coming hard and it's going to be a great question. I'd love to see schools study it because not just technologically, but metaphorically, what does it mean for us? Storytelling. Yeah.
All right. First of all, thank you so much for the amazing lecture. But my question is,
But yeah.
out of all the beautiful designs that you did, which one challenged you the most and why?
Oof.
Great question.
The ones that don't pay. No, I think the hardest ones lately have not been something I think about, only because I think people really do love to tell their story, no matter what it is, decorating or landscaping or hardscapes or, you know, a house. I think the best and hardest part is getting inside them and getting their emotions, and not just their emotions. I'm talking about deep psychological stuff, like what really makes them who they are. That's one reason the Culture Sacred program stuff that in Julio are working the semester on stuff with a church, a Catholic church of all things. How do we dig deeper and deeper into that understanding? That's all I can think about when I start meeting with a client. I can do dollars per square foot like no other. Kelly will correct it all, but beat me up on it. But we all in our office, we shared just that same attitude. Does that answer you? No. My favorite, I couldn't tell you. I do like living in the treehouse. I used to watch a lot of Tarzan movies. Feels good.
Thank you, Travis, very much. Please join us for the reception in Miller, please. And then if you have AIA credits to get, please come here and sign up, please, for me. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.